What if an ordinary nickel in your pocket was hiding a story most people never noticed? Today, we're going deeper than dates and mint marks as we uncover 4 Jefferson nickels connected to America's changing history. From Denver to Philadelphia, we'll examine the details collectors search for, the varieties and errors that can matter, and the condition differences that separate ordinary coins from truly collectible ones. Today, we're uncovering the clues collectors watch for when hunting hidden value. Thank you for your precious time and incredible support. Stay with us, because the final discovery may change the way you look at your pocket change forever. Imagine finding a 5-cent coin in ordinary pocket change and realizing that the face staring back at you represents a moment when American coinage quietly changed forever. At first glance, the 2006 Jefferson nickel looks almost too ordinary to notice. It was made in enormous numbers, it carries the familiar denomination of 5 cents, and millions of examples have passed through American hands. But look closer, because this was not just another nickel. Released into circulation on January 12, 2006, it became the first circulating United States coin to show a president facing directly forward, ending nearly a century of traditional presidential profile portraits. And that small change in perspective is where the story begins. To understand why the 2006 matters, we have to step back into the America of 2006. The country was emerging from the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. The housing boom was still underway. Iraq remained a major part of the national conversation, and technology was rapidly reshaping everyday life. YouTube was becoming a cultural phenomenon, smartphones were beginning to change how people communicated, and Americans were increasingly living in a world that felt faster and more connected. Into that atmosphere came the final chapter of the United States Mint's Westward Journey Nickel series. The series had begun in 2004 to commemorate the bicentennials of the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark expedition, and after the temporary designs of 2004 and 2005, the nickel returned to something familiar, Monticello. The Mint called the new design the Return to Monticello nickel. The obverse, however, was anything but ordinary. Thomas Jefferson appears facing forward, inspired by a Rembrandt Peale portrait from 1800. Jamie Franke designed the portrait, while United States Mint sculptor engraver Donna Weaver prepared the sculptural version. Jefferson's name is not printed across the coin, but the word Liberty appears above the date in a distinctive script based on Jefferson's own handwriting, while In God We Trust follows the right side of the portrait. Beneath the 2006 date sits the small but important D mint mark. That single letter tells us the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. Interestingly, 2006 also gave the Jefferson nickel a new mint mark position. After the unusual placement used on the 2005 issue, the mint mark returned beneath the date on the obverse, where collectors would continue to find it. Turn the coin over, and the story becomes even more interesting. Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, is once again the star. The reverse was based on Felix Schlag's classic design, originally introduced in 1938, but the Mint carefully restored details from Schlag's original work. The architecture appears sharper, including restored details around the dome, balconies, doors, and windows. Inscriptions read EPLUOBUSUNUM, MONTICLLO, 5 cents, and United States of America. Look closely and you'll also notice the tiny FS associated with Felix Schlag's work, while the new obverse carries the initials of Jamie Franke and Donna Weaver. What makes this fascinating is that the coin is simultaneously looking forward and backward. Jefferson faces the future on the front, while his historic home returns on the back. Physically, the regular 2006 Jefferson nickel is a compact piece of copper-nickel engineering. It weighs 5 grams, measures approximately 21.2 millimeters across, is about 1.95 millimeters thick, and has a plain, non-reeded edge. Its composition is 75% copper and 25% nickel. The Denver circulation issue had a reported mintage of 809,280,000 coins, which immediately tells us something important. The ordinary 2006 is not rare simply because it is old. In circulated condition, it generally remains a 5-cent coin. The real collecting story begins when condition, strike quality, varieties, and errors enter the picture. And this is where collectors start looking much more carefully. The major collectible distinction is the full steps, or FS, designation. On Jefferson Nickels, collectors pay close attention to the steps of Monticello because contact marks and weak strikes can interrupt those tiny horizontal lines. A sharply struck coin with complete, clearly separated steps can command substantially more attention than an ordinary example. PCGS records the regular 2006 issue in grades reaching MS68 FS, while the standard non-FS population has reached MS67. The same year also produced a special satin finish version, but that is a different issue with a much smaller mintage of 847,361 and should not be confused with a normal circulation strike 2006 nickel. Then there are errors and unusual pieces. A genuine mint error can transform an otherwise common modern nickel into something much more interesting, but this is exactly where caution matters. A damaged coin, machine doubling, scratches, plating discoloration, or damage caused after leaving the mint should not automatically be called an error. Collectors should look for documented varieties or clearly attributable mint-made mistakes and compare them with recognized references before assuming a coin is valuable. The 2006 issue does have recognized variety interest, including the full steps designation and a documented Jamie Frankie signature variety in PCGS's records, but that does not mean every unusual-looking example is rare. So what can one actually be worth? The answer depends heavily on condition. A worn 2006 nickel normally has little premium above its face value. Attractive uncirculated examples may bring modest premiums, while higher-grade pieces with strong eye appeal and especially full steps can become much more collectible. The numbers become dramatically different at the very top of the population. PCGS records a $4,230 auction result for a 2006 Jefferson nickel graded MS68 FS in January 2016. That is an important documented result, but it should not be interpreted as the normal value of a 2006 D nickel. In fact, it demonstrates the opposite. Extraordinary prices are reserved for extraordinarily high-grade examples. That is why authentication and preservation matter. If you think you found an exceptional specimen, avoid cleaning or polishing it. A bright, shiny surface created by cleaning can actually destroy collectible value. Handle the coin carefully by its edges, keep it in an appropriate holder, and compare the weight, diameter, design details, and strike with reliable references. For potentially valuable examples, professional grading from established services such as PCGS or NGC can provide an independent assessment and a protective holder, while also documenting the grade and characteristics of the coin. When selling, collectors should favor established coin dealers, reputable coin shows, major auction houses, or well-documented online marketplaces, and should compare recent sales rather than trusting dramatic claims about supposed rare nickels. The most remarkable thing about the 2006 D Jefferson nickel may be that it hides in plain sight. More than 800 million was struck at Denver, yet the best survivors tell a completely different story from the worn coins that disappear into everyday change. One can be ordinary, another can be beautifully preserved, and another can possess the kind of strike quality that serious Jefferson nickel collectors have spent decades chasing. The coin captures a moment when America was changing, technology was accelerating, and even the nation's pocket change was being redesigned to look toward the future. So the next time a 2006 D nickel lands in your hand, don't dismiss it too quickly. Look at Jefferson's portrait, examine the date and mint mark, turn it over, and study those Monticello steps. Because sometimes the difference between 5 cents and a genuine collectible isn't the year alone. It's what survived between the dies and the moment that coin finally reached your hand. But this remarkable coin is only the beginning. Now let's move to our second coin, where the story becomes even more fascinating. The story of our first coin has brought us to another moment in modern American coinage, but this time the trail becomes quieter. There is no obvious sign of rarity when you see a 2008 Jefferson nickel sitting among ordinary change. It looks familiar, almost forgettable. Yet turn it over, study the surfaces, and check that small letter beneath the date, and suddenly the coin becomes part of a much larger story. This is the 2008 D. Jefferson 5-cent coin, struck at Denver during the final years of the westward journey era. And while hundreds of millions were produced, the examples that survived with exceptional quality can tell a very different story from the worn nickels that passed from hand to hand. By 2008, America was entering a turbulent chapter. The financial crisis was beginning to shake the economy, technology was rapidly transforming daily life, and the country was approaching the end of a decade that had changed how Americans communicated, traveled, and spent money. At the United States Mint, meanwhile, the Jefferson nickel was nearing the end of a remarkable redesign period. The Westward Journey Nickel series had begun in 2004 to commemorate the bicentennials of the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark expedition. By 2008, the temporary designs had passed, and the familiar Jefferson portrait and Monticello reverse had returned. But the modern version was not simply a copy of an older nickel. The Mint had refreshed the design while preserving the historical identity that collectors recognized instantly. On the obverse, Thomas Jefferson faces forward, a dramatic departure from the traditional side-profile portrait that had appeared on Jefferson nickels for generations. The portrait was designed by Jamie Franke, based on a Rembrandt Peale portrait of Jefferson from 1800, while the reverse retained the historic Monticello design associated with Felix Schlag. The word Liberty appears above the date in a script inspired by Jefferson's handwriting, while In God We Trust curves along the right side. Beneath the 2008 date is the small d, the mark identifying Denver as the production facility. Flip the coin over, and Monticello dominates the scene, accompanied by United States of America, 5 cents, and EPLUBUSUNUM. The coin almost feels like a conversation between Jefferson's past and America's present. And beneath that artwork is a surprisingly precise piece of engineering. A standard 2008 D circulation strike nickel weighs 5 grams, measures 21.2 millimeters in diameter, and has a plain edge rather than the reeded edge found on many other United States denominations. Its metal is the familiar Jefferson nickel alloy of 75% copper and 25% nickel. Denver produced 345,600,000 examples of the regular 2008 D issue, making it a common date in ordinary circulated grades. But mintage alone never tells the entire story. The real question for a collector is not simply how many were made, but how many survived with the combination of sharp detail, clean surfaces, attractive luster, and exceptional preservation that today's grading standards reward. Imagine the production floor for a moment. Blanks of copper-nickel alloy were prepared, processed, and struck between dies carrying Jefferson's portrait and Monticello. With enormous quantities moving through production, tiny differences in strike quality were inevitable. Some coins emerged beautifully defined, while others showed weakness in important areas. This is especially significant on the reverse, where collectors examine the steps beneath Monticello. When all the steps are sharply defined and uninterrupted, the coin can qualify for the coveted full steps, or FS, designation. That small detail can separate an ordinary uncirculated nickel from a much more desirable condition rarity. There is another fascinating branch of the 2008 D story, the satin finish issue. These were not ordinary circulation strikes. PCGS records a separate 2008 D satin finish Jefferson nickel with a mintage of 745,464, along with a full steps version. Because these pieces were produced as part of the Mint's special uncirculated sets, their surfaces and production characteristics differ from regular pocket change examples. PCGS records an auction result of $66 for an SB68 FS satin finish example, illustrating that even within the same date and mint mark, different production formats can create very different collector markets. Then comes the question every collector eventually asks: what about errors? The answer requires discipline. A strange-looking nickel is not automatically a valuable mint error. Scratches, dents, environmental discoloration, machine doubling, and damage occurring after the coin left the mint can easily be mistaken for genuine errors. Authentic mint errors should show characteristics consistent with a mistake during the manufacturing process, and serious collectors usually compare suspected pieces with recognized references or professional opinions. For the 2008D, the strongest mainstream collecting interest centers on condition, full steps, and the distinction between regular and satin finish issues rather than imaginary varieties or sensational claims. That brings us to grading. PCGS and NGC use the Sheldon 1 to 70 numerical grading system, with mint state grades generally applied to coins that show no evidence of circulation. For a 2008D, the difference between a typical uncirculated coin and an elite example can be enormous in collector interest. PCGS's records show that the regular issue is represented in high grades, while its full steps designation creates a separate collecting challenge. The lesson is simple: don't assume a shiny nickel is automatically valuable. Examine Jefferson's portrait for contact marks, inspect the fields for scratches, and then turn the coin over and carefully study every step of Monticello. Realistic values follow the same principle. Most circulated 2008D nickels are worth around their face value, and ordinary uncirculated examples generally bring only modest premiums. Exceptional certified coins can be worth more, particularly when they combine a high numerical grade with full steps. PCGS records a $125 auction result for a PCGS genuine 2008D example in May 2022, but that should never be treated as the normal value of the date. It simply demonstrates that individual coins can trade differently depending on their characteristics and marketplace. The safest approach is to compare recent sales of coins with the same grade and designation rather than trusting dramatic online claims. And if you believe you have found an unusually strong example, preservation becomes part of the story. Never polish or chemically clean the coin in an attempt to make it look newer. Hold it by the edges, keep it in a suitable non-damaging holder, and avoid unnecessary handling. For a potentially important specimen, professional authentication and grading through established services such as PCGS or NGC can provide an independent assessment and protective encapsulation. If you eventually decide to sell, established coin dealers, reputable coin shows, established auction companies, and well-documented marketplaces are safer places to research the market than relying on exaggerated claims about hidden fortunes. The 2008D Jefferson nickel reminds us why modern coins can still be fascinating. More than 345 million regular examples came from Denver, yet the best survivors can be separated from the crowd by details almost invisible at first glance. The tiny mint mark, the condition of Jefferson's portrait, the quality of the Monticello steps, and the difference between a circulation strike and satin finish piece all become clues in a much larger investigation. And perhaps that is the real attraction. You don't need a centuries-old coin to uncover history. Sometimes the story is sitting quietly in the palm of your hand, waiting for someone to look closely enough to notice. Now that we've uncovered the secrets of this coin, it's time to move on to coin number 3, where an even rarer story awaits. The trail now leaves Denver behind and takes us somewhere different, because the next clue is not a letter at all. Look at the date, study the coin, and you may notice something missing where the mint mark would normally appear. That empty space is not an accident. It is the signature of Philadelphia, the historic birthplace of American federal coinage, where Jefferson nickels were struck without a mint mark. And after following the 2008D nickel, this change gives us an entirely different collecting experience. There is no dramatic symbol announcing where the coin came from. Instead, the collector has to know what absence means. That is what makes a Philadelphia Jefferson nickel such an intriguing piece of the hunt. Sometimes the clue is the mark that isn't there. Philadelphia's connection to United States coinage reaches back to the earliest days of the Republic, and the mint itself became deeply woven into the nation's financial history. Jefferson's 5-cent coin had already been part of American life for generations by the modern era, first introduced in 1938 to replace the Buffalo nickel. Felix Schlagg's original design placed Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his Virginia home, Monticello, on the reverse. Decades later, the United States Mint temporarily transformed the nickel during the Westward Journey nickel series, commemorating the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark expedition. By the time the modern Jefferson design returned to circulation, the coin carried both historical familiarity and a noticeably more contemporary appearance. The obverse is where the change is most obvious. Jefferson faces forward rather than appearing in the traditional side profile that collectors had known for decades. The portrait was designed by Jamie Franke and was based on a famous Rembrandt Peale portrait of Jefferson from 1800. Around him are the inscriptions Liberty and In God We Trust, while the date sits beneath the portrait. On Philadelphia circulation strikes from the modern era, there is no mint mark beneath the date. Turn the coin over and Monticello returns, connecting the modern portrait to Jefferson's architectural legacy. The reverse carries United States of America, 5 cents, EPLURBUSUNUM, and the familiar building that has made the Jefferson nickel instantly recognizable. Beneath those familiar images lies a precise little piece of American manufacturing. A standard Jefferson nickel weighs 5 grams, measures about 21.2 millimeters in diameter, and is approximately 1.95 millimeters thick. Its edge is plain without reeds, and the traditional alloy consists of 75% copper and 25% nickel. These details may sound technical, but to a serious collector, they are part of the coin's identity. Weight can help detect an altered or counterfeit piece, while diameter, edge appearance, and metal characteristics can provide additional clues when something seems unusual. A coin can tell its story through numbers just as clearly as it does through portraits and inscriptions. But the most interesting discoveries often happen when the coin is tilted beneath good light. Look at Jefferson's cheek and jaw for contact marks. Examine the fields for scratches and disturbances. Then turn the nickel over and slow down at Monticello. The steps beneath the building are one of the most important areas for Jefferson nickel collectors. A sharply struck coin with complete, uninterrupted steps may qualify for the full steps designation, commonly abbreviated FS. This distinction can dramatically increase collector interest because strong step detail is difficult to preserve on many Jefferson nickels. A Philadelphia coin that looks ordinary from across the room can become much more interesting under magnification. There are also special issues and varieties that collectors must separate from ordinary circulation strikes. Modern Jefferson nickels were produced in different finishes for annual mint sets, including satin finish issues during the years when those special uncirculated coins were made. These should not be confused with regular Philadelphia circulation coins. Genuine errors can also occur during the minting process, but this is where patience becomes more valuable than excitement. A strange color, damaged rim, doubled-looking lettering, or unusual mark does not automatically mean a rare mint error. Post-mint damage and mechanical effects can create convincing imitations. Before assigning a premium value, collectors should compare the coin with recognized references and, for significant pieces, seek professional attribution. Grading is another chapter in the mystery. Services such as PCGS and NGC evaluate coins on the familiar 1 to 70 numerical scale, while uncirculated examples receive mint state grades. For a modern nickel, the difference between an average mint state specimen and an exceptionally preserved coin can come down to tiny marks that are almost invisible without magnification. Full steps can create an additional level of competition. Collectors searching for top-grade Philadelphia Jefferson nickels are not merely looking for a shiny surface. They are looking for sharp strikes, clean fields, attractive luster, strong details, and minimal contact marks. At the highest levels, preservation becomes the story. And that leads naturally to value. Most ordinary Philadelphia Jefferson nickels from modern circulation are worth close to face value, even when they are decades old. Uncirculated pieces may bring modest premiums, while certified high-grade coins with desirable designations can command considerably more. Exceptional prices should never be assumed simply because a coin is old-looking or unusual. The correct comparison is always with recent sales of the same date, mint, finish, grade, and designation. A coin graded MS66 is not automatically comparable with an MS67 full steps example, and a satin finish piece belongs to a different category from a circulation strike. The market rewards verified characteristics, not dramatic stories. If you believe you've discovered something special, resist the temptation to improve it yourself. Do not polish, scrub, dip, or chemically clean the surface. Even an innocent attempt to make a coin brighter can leave permanent evidence and reduce its desirability. Hold it by the edges, protect it in an appropriate holder, and document what you see before sending it anywhere. For potentially valuable examples, professional authentication and grading from established services such as PCGS or NGC can provide independent confirmation. When it is time to sell, reputable coin dealers, established auction companies, major coin shows, and well-established online marketplaces can provide legitimate avenues, but always compare recent completed sales and understand the fees involved before accepting an offer. What makes the Philadelphia Jefferson Nickels so compelling is not that every example is valuable. It is that an ordinary-looking 5-cent piece can contain layers of history that reveal themselves only to someone willing to slow down. The missing mint mark becomes a clue. The Monticello steps become evidence. The tiny marks across Jefferson's portrait become part of a grading investigation. And suddenly, the coin in your hand stops being spare change and becomes a small artifact of American manufacturing, design, and collecting culture. And if you thought this coin was extraordinary, wait until you see our final coin. Let's move to the last chapter of today's countdown. And now, after uncovering the hidden clues in our third coin, we arrive at the final chapter of today's countdown. But perhaps the most interesting thing about this last coin is how little it seems to demand your attention. It is not ancient, it is not made of precious metal, and millions of examples entered circulation. Yet sitting quietly among those ordinary nickels is a coin that carries more than a denomination. The 2014 Philadelphia Jefferson Nickel belongs to a long-running American story about presidents, architecture, craftsmanship, and the remarkable fact that history can survive in objects small enough to disappear inside your pocket. To understand this coin, we have to return to the beginning of the Jefferson nickel itself. The denomination was introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel and placing Thomas Jefferson on the nation's 5-cent piece. The original design by Felix Schlag paired Jefferson's portrait with Monticello, his Virginia home. More than 7 decades later, the United States Mint had already taken the Jefferson nickel through the Westward Journey nickel series, and then returned to a modernized version of the classic design. By 2014, the dramatic forward-facing portrait of Jefferson had become familiar, while Monticello remained on the reverse, creating a fascinating bridge between America's early republic and the modern United States. The obverse is immediately recognizable. Jefferson faces forward, based on the 1800 Rembrandt Peale portrait that inspired the modern design by Jamie Franke. The word Liberty appears above the date in lettering inspired by Jefferson's handwriting, while In God We Trust runs along the right side. Because this particular coin was struck in Philadelphia for circulation, there is no mint mark beneath the date. That empty space is itself a piece of information. Turn the coin over and Monticello dominates the reverse, surrounded by United States of America, 5 cents, and EPLUBUSUNUM. The design is familiar, but under magnification, every line and surface becomes part of the collector's investigation. The physical specifications are equally precise. A standard 2014 Jefferson nickel weighs 5 grams, measures approximately 21.2 millimeters in diameter, and is about 1.95 millimeters thick. Its edge is plain, and the regular nickel composition is 75% copper and 25% nickel. Philadelphia produced 327,200,000 circulation strike examples in 2014. That enormous production figure immediately tells us something important. The ordinary circulated 2014 Philadelphia nickel is not rare simply because of its date. The opportunity lies elsewhere, in condition, strike quality, recognized varieties, and genuine mint errors. And this is where the final hunt begins. Turn the coin beneath a strong light and examine Jefferson's portrait. Are the fields clean? Are there contact marks across the cheek or jaw? Does the surface still show original mint luster? Then flip it over and focus on Monticello. Jefferson nickel collectors have long paid close attention to the steps beneath the building, because sharply defined, uninterrupted steps can qualify a coin for the full steps designation. On a modern nickel, that tiny area can make an enormous difference in collector interest. A coin that looks ordinary in a pile can become much more interesting when its strike and preservation separate it from thousands of similar pieces. There is another reason experienced collectors slow down before declaring a coin rare. Genuine errors must be distinguished from damage. A missing detail, unusual color, scratch, rim problem, or apparent doubling can have many explanations. Some characteristics are caused by normal die wear or striking conditions, while others happen after the coin leaves the mint. A legitimate mint error should show evidence consistent with a manufacturing mistake. For unusual pieces, comparison with trusted references and professional attribution is far safer than relying on sensational claims found online. The same caution applies to supposed varieties. A recognized variety has a documented diagnostic feature. A random imperfection does not automatically create a rare coin. Then comes grading, where the story becomes even more precise. PCGS and NGC use the familiar 1 to 70 grading scale, with mint state grades assigned to coins showing no evidence of circulation. At higher levels, tiny contact marks, weak strike areas, surface disturbances, and luster quality become increasingly important. Full steps can add another layer of desirability. This is why two 2014 Philadelphia nickels that look nearly identical to an inexperienced eye can have very different market values once professionally examined. The highest prices belong to exceptional specimens, not ordinary pocket change. For most collectors, however, expectations should remain realistic. A circulated 2014 Philadelphia nickel is generally worth around face value, while attractive uncirculated examples may carry modest premiums. Certified high-grade pieces, particularly those with desirable full steps characteristics, can be worth considerably more. The safest way to estimate value is to compare recent sales for the exact date, mint, grade, and designation, rather than trusting a headline claiming that a common nickel is secretly worth thousands. The market is driven by verified rarity and condition, not internet excitement. If you believe your coin deserves a closer examination, preservation should come first. Never polish it, scrub it, or use chemicals to make the surface brighter. Handle it by the edges and keep it in a suitable holder that will not damage the metal. If the coin appears genuinely exceptional, professional authentication and grading through established services such as PCGS or NGC can provide documentation and protection. Serious collectors can buy and sell through reputable coin dealers, established auction companies, major coin shows, and well-known online marketplaces, while carefully checking recent comparable sales and understanding buyer or seller fees. And perhaps that is the lesson hidden inside this final 5-cent coin. Coin collecting was never really about finding a magical piece of metal that instantly changes your life. It is about learning to see what other people overlook. A date becomes a historical clue, a mint mark or its absence becomes evidence. A tiny line on Monticello becomes a reason to look again, and an ordinary coin becomes a doorway into the people, technology, craftsmanship, and history of an entire nation. So the next time you receive change, don't rush past it. Take a second look. Search the old jar, the drawer, the pocket, and the forgotten collection sitting somewhere in your home. You may not find a fortune, and that's okay. What you might find is something just as valuable, a piece of history that survived long enough to reach your hands. If you enjoyed this journey, make sure to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more coin discoveries and hidden history. And most importantly, keep searching, because the next remarkable coin may not be sitting in a museum. It could already be waiting quietly in your own collection, just one careful look away.